Hey, welcome back to the Language of series. My name is Amy Lancy. I am a communication consultant. I love helping business owners speak their audience's language. And I have this series because I see languages exist everywhere, not just by country or ethnicity, but by expertise, by industry, by experience, by community. And that's why I have this show, because that way we can all just see the different languages that we are all speaking and better understand that we're all more on the same page than we think we are. And if we understand that, then maybe the world would be a better place. So I have today my friend Rachel. She is a life coach and shadow work coach, and spiritual life coach. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, yeah. Okay, so but we are talking about the language of shadows today, because Rachel has been coaching many people, on how to do shadow work. And so before I go into what shadow work is, Rachel, can you just please tell the audience a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you said I'm a spiritual life coach and a shadow work coach, and basically, I work at the intersection of emotional, mental health, relationships, spirituality. Kind of merge all those things together. I started
Hmm.
off as an author. Honestly, I wrote a couple of books, and from there, people started reaching out, and I started exploring this idea of being a life coach, which brought me here to the spiritual realm because I'm also into spirituality, and so I kind of see how the overlap exists, and so here I am.
Yay! And can you share with the audience what the name of your books in case they want to check you out later?
Yes, so I have two books. One is called Chasing Unicorns. It's a book of poetry that kind of follows the stages of a relationship from beginning to end. And
Mhm.
then the other book is called Hashtags I Know It's Real. It's a mixture of poetry and prose that I wrote to kind of give you a little insight into my experiences with twin flames. So
Yay! Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have you on the show. And Rachel and I, we have gotten really close over the last couple of years. We've been in a couple of intuitive groups, and just, I don't know, I feel like we check in, I don't know, at least a few times a week.
uh-huh. Yeah.
It's been great. It's been awesome. We talk about all kinds of things.
All kinds
And
of things, all the
all
things.
kinds of things. All the things. I can tell Rachel anything, and I can trust that she's not going to judge me for it. But I
Hmm.
can also trust that she's going to tell me the truth, which is
Hmm.
awesome. So, which is
Same
what
with
you
you.
need in a coach, because yeah, thank you. Thank you. Because you don't want someone who is, I mean, you want someone who's on your side and not going to be judgmental, but you also don't want someone who's an enabler and, just
Yes.
going to go with you no matter what. Like, you need someone who's
Uh-huh.
going to be honest. So,
Hmm.
so yeah, no, I think that's why I wanted Rachel on the show, because she's a really great coach. She's a really great friend, and she knows what she's talking about. So, and so just to dive in into what shadow work is, can you explain to the audience what is shadow work?
Okay. So shadow work is the intentional work we do to become more self-aware, self-observant. Typically we look at trauma that we may have experienced in the past. And I want to
Mhm,
stop there to talk about trauma is not always dramatic.
mhm,
Oftentimes we hear the word trauma, we think about some kind of like sexual assault or some kind of physical assault or verbal assault, but it may not always look like that. Sometimes trauma can be subtle. But we look at the traumas that we've experienced and see how it has shaped us and how it's caused us to respond in certain ways. So we're also looking at triggers. We're also looking at our responses to these triggers and, are they healthy for us? Have they been helpful for us? How have they been unhealthy for us? And
mhm.
working to find healthier options and ways to respond. And so when we do that type of work, we
Yes.
are learning to be more self-accepting of ourselves. We're doing it in a non-judgmental space. Because you mentioned being not judgmental. We're observing ourselves, observing our actions, but not judging ourselves and being critical of ourselves.
Right. Yes, because shadows, like you said, it doesn't have to be like the huge traumas, right? Because yeah, there are those huge traumas such as abuse
Hmm.
and molestation. but then or divorce or
Mm-hmm.
breakup. So there are also those like, the little ones, such as someone didn't ask me to go to the prom, or someone didn't ask me to join in with them, or
Mm-hmm.
someone rejected me in this little instance. That has such a lifelong impact
Yes.
on you, and that is part of shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a true believer in shadow work because we live in a society that praises terms such as light workers and embracing the light, I'm all for that. But when we hold on to that only, we don't look at the shadows, because we look at the shadows as, well, I'm not that, but well, really, in reality, the shadows are part of you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you don't accept that part of you, then you can't really accept yourself.
Right. And usually those shadows kind of come back stronger. I was reading
Yes.
something before. I can't remember the name of it. Oh, I wish I knew. But they described it as, if you're in a swimming pool and you take a floating device and you push it underwater and you keep pushing, you let it go, it pops back up. That's kind of the
Yes.
same way shadows work. We try to hide them under the surface. They come back like, hey, I'm right
Oh,
here. I didn't go anywhere.
I never
Don't
thought
forget
about it
about me
that
over
way.
here.
That's so true. And it's gonna try to keep rising to the surface. It doesn't just eventually deflate. It just
Mhm.
keeps on coming up,
Yep.
and you can't avoid it, and you can't just sit there floating it down forever.
Right.
So,
This is a
so
part
I
of
guess
who we
the
are. Is a part of
yes,
us.
yes, exactly. So would you say that part of shadow work is being able to let go of that pool toy, to let it come to the surface, and then figuring out what to do when it comes to the surface then?
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I like to look at it like in order to do that, you have to acknowledge ego. And we talk about ego, oftentimes we hear it in terms of like, this pompous attitude, but that's not always ego. Ego is just kind of like the mask that we put on to show the world so that we can be accepted, so that we can have needs met. Whatever role that we play in the
Mhm.
world can be ego. And
Yeah.
when we fulfill that role, it's like we put on a mask. And so we
Mhm.
create this mask, and what's on top of the mask, like what's under the mask is a shadow, right? That's the things that we're hiding.
Right.
So I'm only going to
Yeah.
show you the things that I know are acceptable by other people. But there are other parts of me that I know or I feel like it
Mhm.
won't be accepted. And those are the shadows. And it may not always be bad, I was put those in quotes, bad traits. Because people like
Yeah.
to say I have these bad things about me, these toxic traits. And I hate that term,
Right.
Amy. Because it's
Yeah.
like
I
that also puts us in a place of not accepting who we are when we label ourselves as good or bad, toxic, all these
mhm.
words just but there are also things
Right.
about us that we hide, like talents, the things that we're good at, the things that, feed us,
Mhm.
emotionally and spiritually, because we won't be accepted by other people. We feel like we won't be accepted by other people as well. And it's also just detrimental to us because we're not living our truth. We're not
Yes.
being who we are destined to be, who we're supposed to be, because we're hiding, in the shadows. Did I lose you?
Maybe. Yeah,
Oh,
I
there we
see
go.
shadows. Oh, no, I'm here. I'm right here.
Okay.
Ah, dang, internet reception. Okay, we're good. Okay.
Okay.
But I was just gonna say, when it comes to our shadows, we can't just pretend they're not there, because
Right.
that's like pretending my arm's not there. It's like pretending my foot's not
Absolutely.
there. Like, but yeah, you're right. I don't like that term toxic, or like I have ugly traits. I have ugly emotions. I don't want to feel the ugly emotions. And
Hmm.
so the audience, just so you know, like when we're speaking about, just we're talking about all these key words that people are using that we notice
Yeah.
when it comes to our own shadows, like ugly emotions, toxic emotions, the understanding what ego really is,
Hmm.
and triggers. So, and it's
Hmm.
just it's a whole culture around it. But it sounds like, Rachel, that right now in this stage where we're at, that we are having, like, the language of shadow work basically means the language of changing the mindset and changing the culture around how we view our own emotional and spiritual health.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm. Okay,
Yeah.
good. I was like, did she agree with that? Yay. Okay, cool. Um, and I think one thing I wanted to clarify earlier that I wanted to hear from you is, you mentioned the word triggers, and so, I mean, you and I know what triggers are, but some people may not know what triggers are in the audience. So if you could just define, what are triggers? What is that? What are they? What are they, and what do they look like, or what can they look like?
So triggers are, how can I describe it? It's like your mind and your body remembering a past event
Yes.
or making a connection from a present moment to a past event. And it may not look exactly like the past event, but it's enough for the mind to say, wait, I think we've been here before. Someone could have
Yes.
said something to you. Someone could have done something to you. Someone could have treated you a certain way, made you feel a certain way that reminds you of a past event. And so you are placed back into that past event. When you were triggered, we're placed back into that same position. So if a parent made me feel a certain way by telling me something about how I was dressed or criticizing me for the way I was dressed, and I felt ashamed. And then as an adult, someone makes a comment about my hair, and I'm like, and I get placed right back into that place when I was 12, and my mom told me, you look crazy, you look silly. And then I feel like a 12-year-old again in that moment because I'm brought back to that place. So that's kind of like how I describe triggers. Our body sometimes remembers and our mind remembers. And sometimes when our body remembers, we'll get sensations in our body. Like for me, I know that I would say this: my back gets hot, my my jaw gets tight when I'm triggered. And I may not always notice it in that moment, but if I kind of stop and pause and check, like, okay, wait, I'm getting hot, my jaw is tightened, like, okay, what's happening in this moment right now? Because this is my body giving me signals that I'm moving into a triggered state.
Right. There's gonna be a physical and emotional reaction to all this. And now you're making me think, like, how do I react when I'm triggered? I think when I'm triggered, I get paralyzed for a second. I'm like, something's off, and I feel disconnected from my body. Like, I don't know what just happened. And then the emotions start coming. Like, it could be anger, it could be sadness, it could be worry, it could be stress, whatever it is. But you're right, there's a whole physical sensation with it. And so it also sounds like shadow work is also a language of self.
Yeah, it's really self-awareness, self-observation. It's almost like you kind of step out of yourself and like look at yourself.
Yeah. And you know what, when you were talking about triggers being something that something happens and reminds you of something from long ago, from in my mind, this is the visual I have when it comes to my own triggers, is that there's me right here in the present moment. There's like far away, there's the thing that happened long ago. I may not be able to see it. I may not be able to, understand what's over there, but I know it's over there, right? So they're seeing that, but then in between is a minefield. And so
Right.
I kind of look at I looked at, like, if someone triggers me, it's more like they pushed me over and I hit one of the mines, and then things explode, and then I have to deal with whatever that explosion looked like, whether that was like I got really sad and I reverted, or I got really angry and I said something to somebody. So that's the visual I personally get when it comes to triggers.
Because sometimes we can be in a triggering battle, like I'll say something, and it may not always be on purpose.
Yeah.
I may say something because we're not always aware of other people's triggers.
Exactly.
And so we may say something and not even know that that's a trigger for that person. So we'll say something, trigger them, they respond, and their response may trigger us, and we're just triggering each other. And that's what arguments sometimes turn into, triggering battles.
Oh my gosh. Now I'm thinking about how everyone is a walking minefield. I mean, and that's a kind of a scary visual.
But the thing about it is, like, it's a scary visual, but it kind of puts it in context for us when we're dealing with people.
Yeah.
Because we know that we have our own things that we're battling, and people also have their things that they're battling. And so it can help us to give each other grace.
Yes.
When dealing with people, because I don't know what your shadows are. And when you respond in certain ways that are not pleasant, then you can say, well, they may be dealing with something that has nothing to do with me. Because sometimes it's not about us, it's about that person in the shadows that they are dealing with.
I think that's hard to tell, right? At first, you see that reaction, and then I know for me, I'll see that reaction, and I'll start to blame. Well, I'll start to think back to what happened, start to dissect it, and then blame myself or take
Hmm.
responsibility. And then I'll finally realize, oh wait, the other person could have been going through something that I have no clue about, and I
Yeah.
can't possibly be dissecting that because I don't know what. I mean, they're not going to want to talk to me at the moment to
Right.
tell me, and they may not be aware of it.
Hmm.
So, I mean, do you feel like when people have done shadow work that they're more likely to um be compassionate toward others? I mean, and you use the word grace for
Hmm.
everyone, but do you feel like they're more able to show compassion to another person, even if the other person said some very sharp and choice words?
Yeah, I think we are, but it doesn't always happen automatically.
Yeah, yeah,
You may not always say, "Oh, that's okay. They're having some other issues I may not know about." You probably will get triggered, but we take the
yeah.
time to process your own stuff and say,
Mhm.
"Okay, no, I'm like you say, you may go into blame." And the other kids are like, "No, I'm not gonna blame myself for this. This is not me. That's something that they may be dealing with, and maybe we can have a conversation about it later when we're in a better state to talk about what happened. And sometimes people are aware, they can verbalize and say, hey, this triggered me because blah 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 blah, but then some people aren't. But even when they aren't, we still, I think, once you go through this type of process, you are able to identify that's what it is and have compassion for them, even if they can't identify for themselves. We may not know all the ins and outs of the shadows, but when we
Yeah.
can step back and process and say, well, did I do anything wrong? Did I say something inappropriate
Yeah.
that, just in a general sense, like, was that, was I trying to be manipulative? Was I trying to be hurtful to them? No, check. I'm going through your checklist, your mental checklist. Like, no, I
Yeah.
really wasn't. Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe it's not me here. Maybe it's something there, and you can be more compassionate towards
Mhm.
them. Yeah, doesn't always
No,
mean that we can reconcile from some of these things, but you can be more understanding. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. No, I love the way you explained it because you did explain how at the end there can be more understanding and compassion and reconciliation. But I love how you pointed out that there's still, even when you do shadow work, there's still going to be that flurry of emotions to sort through afterwards. Because I
Hmm.
think there's for some reason, I think that most people haven't have this image that if you reach if you do the work, you're gonna be like a monk who is never fazed by anything and never angered at all. And I and I think
Yeah.
that when we are triggered by our own emotions and dealing with our own shadows, we're like, oh man, like I'm so far away from being an enlightened being. When really,
and,
it we're really just trying to complete the cycle as opposed to denying that there's a cycle at all.
and yeah, and that's something I hear a lot from people in the community and even my clients when they have a reaction or response that seemed out of character,
Yeah,
because it feels like, oh, I was doing my work, I was doing my healing work, I was progressing so well, and then I have a setback.
yeah,
So maybe I'm not as far along as I thought. But it's
yeah,
not, it's not a smooth, clean break from these types of behaviors and triggers. Like, because when we think in that way, it's if we're saying we want to eliminate the triggers or eliminate the trauma, because triggers come
mhm,
from trauma. Eliminate the
yeah,
trauma. We can't erase trauma. It happened. It's part of shaping kind of who we are. So we can't erase those things, but we can be aware of them and be
yes,
conscious of them and make better choices for ourselves. But that is
yeah.
a misconception that I hear a lot, that, once you've healed, then you are completely trigger free. Nothing bothers you. It's all love and light. And no,
Not
no, no.
true. No,
I'm
no, I
I'm just not in that belief. And I feel like it almost comes to the point of seeking perfection when we
yes.
look at healing in that way. We're seeking perfection. Then that's other shadow you have to look into. Why are you seeking perfection? Where does that come from?
Yes. Yes. And the thing is yeah, when I think about seeking perfection, right? But thinking about if I'm just healed for life and but I'm not looking at the whole I'm seeking perfection, then there's a whole other shadow you're not really looking at, and then you're just there's a whole other set of shadow work that you're avoiding.
Yeah,
So, and you're
yeah,
not, and I think that the whole point of shadow work is to look at things that you didn't want to look at before, things that could challenge, probably will challenge the idea that you are not, that you are perfect, and
uh-huh,
and that can be really hard for
hmm,
a ton of people. And
yeah,
I think that that kind of goes into something else I wanted to ask you about is, I mean, you said that some people think that once they do some shadow work and they're healed, they don't need to do anything else. I mean, do you think that there's something about shadow work that people are afraid of? I mean, in addition, I mean, there are the people that haven't done any shadow work, and then there's the
hmm.
people that have done some shadow work but don't want to proceed anymore. Like, do you think that there's a fear about doing shadow work for ourselves?
That there is a fear around shadow work because
Mhm,
one fear comes from the fear of the unknown. I don't really know what it is. I don't know what will surface. I don't know what's going to be the result of this. There's
mhm,
also another fear where I don't know what's going to happen. Also, another unknown fear is I don't know what's going to happen once I open Pandora's box because, like, I know I've dealt with XYZ in my past, and if I have to revisit that, I don't know how I'm going to respond and if I can recover from it.
mhm, mhm.
So I do see that fear. How people shy away from it, and I've worked with people that we start to kind of start peeling back some of those layers. Like, oh, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I can't. You're asking too many like thought-provoking questions. You're going a little bit deeper than I want to go because you start to hit those wounds.
Yeah.
You hit those wounds, and this
Mhm,
hurts to talk about these
mhm,
things, or it's hurtful to acknowledge that I've acted in these ways. It's hurtful to
mhm,
look in the mirror and say
mhm,
I have experienced this. I've accepted this, or I haven't accepted this yet, or I've hurt other people in this way as a result. Because sometimes we live life and not realize how we've hurt other people. When we have to look back, we can see, oh wow, like I already did treat that person like crap
mhm,
because I
mhm.
was in my own world, in my own pain that I didn't realize I was hurting other people around me. And so to revisit and to, review your life again and see how you responded and acted, sometimes people get a sense of shame
Mhm,
and they don't want to talk about it. So yeah,
mhm.
there is a fear around doing shadow work, either because they don't know what it is and what will happen, or because they don't want to revisit those those past experiences and behaviors.
Yes. It's hard. It's not easy. And I was chuckling a little bit while you were talking, and not because I thought it was funny, but because when you were talking about, no, don't do that. Like I was thinking about how I've had my own resistance to my own shadow work. Like, no, I don't want to. No, 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 no. I don't want anything to do with this. No, this is hard. This is too hard. So
It's
I was
hard. Uh-huh.
laughing at myself. I wasn't laughing at you.
Oh yeah, it's fine.
But I was just laughing, I'm like, "Oh, I've been there." Yeah, now I can laugh at myself now.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, it's hard and it's painful,
Hmm.
and I think that when people hear shadow work, they're like, "Oh, it's gonna be, darkness all over,"
Hmm.
and, I think what it
Just
is
because the
that
name itself has that connotation of like bad or
yeah,
evil or creepy shadow. I wish
yeah,
I had
yeah,
another
yeah.
name.
Yes, yes. Like we're gonna go into the deepest, darkest parts of it. It is, but it doesn't have to be all scary. And I think the point of shadow work is to find the light on the other side. So
Hmm.
yeah, and to bring in that self-acceptance and self-awareness,
Hmm.
and to learn those tools too when they do surface.
Hmm.
So because I think I mean, Rachel, you can let me know if you have a similar view or have a different view. But how I kind of look at it is that it's not like we're ever really getting rid of shadows. It's that we are tackling them in a way where they have less power over us.
Yes.
Yes.
like we said, when you push the floating device down and it pops back up, it's going to keep popping back up. Just let
Yes.
it sit at the surface.
Yeah.
Be aware of it, because we
Mhm.
can, we get triggered. It's like, okay, I'm triggered because, right now I'm experiencing, this is my abandonment wound right now. It's causing me to feel this way and respond this way, right?
Mhm.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying I don't have an abandonment issue. I'm just saying this is what's causing me to feel this way in this moment. This what caused me to say or do this thing in this moment. Why am I
Yeah.
anxious in this moment? Because my abandonment issues are kind of rearing their head right now, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
I think you mentioned on the post one day, give yourself what you need in that moment.
Yes.
Identifying what it is I'm feeling. Why am I feeling this way? This is the floating device on the pool. This is the, raft in the pool. I see it there. This is
Mhm.
why it's here. Now, what do I need in this moment to feel comfortable with seeing this thing in the pool? Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's interesting whenever I ask myself and whenever I ask other people, what do you need? There's always that pause because it's for some reason the way we're living today, we've disconnected with our what we really need. And when it comes to shadow work, I mean obviously that's really deep work and the
Mm-hmm.
triggers will just show up and there's a whole lot of emotions to cycle through when that happens, so it is really hard to understand what you really need. But
Yeah.
I think that once you're able to understand, well, part of the process is figuring out what I need, then it just becomes I think it becomes a muscle that you exercise
Mm-hmm.
um and practice. So so yeah, I think I mean, I definitely think those in the audience who are listening, I think that even though shadow work sounds foreboding, intimidating, overwhelming, and scary, it's something that we all have done at
Yeah.
some point in some way. You may have not even
Mm-hmm.
realized it,
Yeah.
but it's something that's necessary. So, and I think that it's not something to be afraid of. It's just something to just try out little by little, like Rachel was saying, peel back the onion, peel back the layers.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't
We're
have to
never really done
be,
with shadow work.
yes, exactly. We're
So
never
we're
really
always
done.
peeling back layers.
Because I know that, I can look at the big things that happened to me in my life and say, okay, well, I dealt with those, we're fine. But there's all
Uh-huh.
these little things that maybe I
Mm-hmm.
didn't, I'm still uncovering. Like, oh, I didn't know that thing had anything to do with that thing, but now I
Yes.
understand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are always, I don't want to say we're always a work in progress. Everyone says that. Like, we are always working on ourselves. There's always something to work on with
Yep.
ourselves.
We're always learning something
Uh,
new about ourselves.
yes. And so, Rachel, how, with your core products and services, how do you help your audience and your clients with shadow work?
Okay, so initially I started offering it started off as 2 weeks, believe it or not. I started off with a 2-week shadow work course, which has turned into a 4-week shadow work course because it's so intense and I
Yeah.
can't really just my clients really can't process the information in that short amount of time. And so I extended to a 4-week program. However, I even noticed in the 4-week program, there's still some, it's like aftercare and work that needs to be done after that. So I offer ongoing coaching as well. And so each month we dedicate to a different, I would say, shadow. So we talk about procrastination, that's a shadow. We talk about how to manage your emotions, that's a shadow. We talk about self-love and being able to give ourselves what we need. So
Mhm.
each month we tackle a different aspect of shadow work. So my 4-week course kind of introduce you to shadow work, explain the history of it, what it is, and I take you through a practice to start digging and uncovering some of those shadows. And then my ongoing group coaching is more focused, more intense because we have each month is different, dealing with a different aspect of shadow work or a different shadow.
I love that. And I love that you start off with a topic that most people would not even think about is part of shadow work, which is procrastination.
Hmm.
A lot of people be like, "Oh no, that's just my laziness." Like,
Yeah.
well, probably a reason why you're dragging your feet doing certain things. There's probably something somewhere that
Hmm.
says it's okay to do this or is encouraging this.
Yes.
So I love that you're starting with a topic that most people are like, oh, really? There's a shadow? And also, I feel like it's safer for most people to kind of look at, right? As opposed
Hmm.
to the self care aspect, which is, that naturally I feel like goes really deeper,
Hmm.
much deeper. So, so this was a lovely talk with you. And
Yes.
yes, I was like, oh man, we're gonna talk about shadow work. How's this gonna go? But this is gonna be good. So, but but before I let you go, Rachel, tell people how can they reach you?
They can find me on my website, racheldgarrison.com, and also on Facebook. I have a business page, Rachel D. Garrison, and then I have a personal page, which is kind of my other business page, honestly. It's Rachel D. So I'm not really on Instagram and all the other stuff. I have those accounts, but I really don't hang out there.
Yeah.
Like Facebook is my playground. So website or my Facebook page.
Awesome. So if any of you are curious about or really want to dive into, not just curious, but really want to dive into shadow work, reach out to Rachel and, check out her course because yeah, it's going to be it's pretty awesome. So, thank you, Rachel, for being on here.
Thank
This was
you.
lovely, as I said before. And everyone, thank you for tuning into the Language of series. Please tune back to my YouTube channel for more episodes with myself and experts to talk about languages that are all around us. So, thank you.